Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Ben Backus.
And I'm Kevin Paulin, and welcome to the Falling Up Podcast, where we have conversations about turning obstacles into opportunities. And on today's show, we have the pleasure of being joined by Miss Rosalie Daly.
Another great conversation.
Yes, sir.
We talk about everything from her job in corporate America, being the VP of a bank, to transitioning to full-time entrepreneur, starting numerous businesses, and all the obstacles that were endured and overcome. And then in addition, I think we were able to really break down some fundamental principles to being successful. I definitely learned a lot. She put us onto some interesting people that I'm definitely going to deep dive into.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. So without further ado, welcome to the Falling Up Podcast.
Cool. So thank you for having me. And my name is Rosalie Daly, a.k.a. you can call me Rose. I'm a corporate professional turned entrepreneur. I've been in retail banking for a decade. My last position, I was the first Black female vice president for the bank I used to work for before I transitioned into entrepreneurship. I have two businesses currently. One is the transportation logistics, which is the trucking company. And the second business is my business support services company, where I help entrepreneurs build profitable businesses, also show them how to legitimize their business and really act like a business, because I saw that was missing, especially from being in banking. That was the number one thing that I focused on, and that's why I did so well. And yeah.
That's dope.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot to talk about tonight.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot to talk about tonight. So, can you just kind of let us know how you got started in banking? Was that always kind of like a passion, or how did that sprout?
So, interestingly enough, I was attending Central Connecticut State University.
Blue Devils.
And my friend had got a job at the bank. And when she told me about it, I was like, oh, how much they're paying? She's like, I'm making $11.25 an hour. I said, oh, sign me up. That was 2010? Around, was it 2010? I think it was around 2010 or even further before that. And I ended up applying. I got a job at Bank of America, and it was a part-time job. And I really was just looking for something a little bit more secure, because I used to work for Zales as a jewelry consultant. And I would do that while I was going to school. I would work on the weekends, drive all the way back to my hometown, which was, I'm from Bridgeport, Connecticut. And I would drive all the way back to Bridgeport, Connecticut on the weekends to work at Zales for the weekend and come back to school on the weekdays. And it just wasn't doing it for me. So when she told me about that opportunity at the bank, I was like, let me jump on it. And I started part-time, and that's how I began my career in banking. And I did what I don't recommend other people to do, but it's just a part of my journey. I was in my fourth year at Central. I walked and everything. I was still missing credits. I was still missing credits, but I had this job, and I was doing so well in my job at the bank, and they offered me full-time. Eventually, I went from part-time. They offered me, hey, you're doing so well. We want to give you a full-time position. Took it. I kind of let my schooling go to the back, though I was so close, right? Pretty much walked the stage, finished everything, right? And I just probably had maybe 2 classes that I need to make up to complete everything, completely get my degree. And I just put it to the back burner, and I said, I'm going to do this career in banking. My mom doesn't even know that.
Yeah.
I went back and I did some summer classes and try to finish it up. But I just was so focused that I had this good job and I was doing so well. And this is what a lot of us wanted. A lot of us go to college and we don't even find a good job out of college. We end up working that same job that we were working in college that wasn't paying. And, we have these student loan debts. And I was like, okay, I see myself in a career in banking, so let me continue. And that's what I did. I went full force, and I just got really good at being a banker. But I started out as a part-time teller, got promoted to a full-time teller, and I really had some good role models next to me. And that's what pushed me to be better, to try, because banking was new, scary. My degree that I was studying is in biology. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a plastic surgeon, to be exact.
Oh, why? Tell me.
I love that. I love operations. I love the body. When I went to school, I was like, why not learn something that's applicable. Like, I want to learn about myself. So that's why I did science. And I call myself a self-proclaimed scientist now. And people always ask me, what does that even mean? I'm like, life is my biggest experiment. Everything that I go through, I'm experimenting. The results sometimes are favorable. Sometimes they're not. You guys know, Falling Up podcast, right?
Definitely.
And I love that mentality because that, for me, and I might be reading into this totally wrong, but it implies not taking things so serious, right? And I think that when I look at some of my assets, it's recognizing that we are all just humans on this journey trying to progress the world, making the world a better place. And again, it's what the principles that really created this podcast was just that. Like, if you have an obstacle, something that is really challenging in your life, like, that's okay. What are you going to do with it?
Absolutely.
And that mindset I find for myself when I'm in going through some of my hardest times, to not take things so seriously and recognize, regardless, it's going to work out. And I look back at like my biggest problem 10 years ago, and I don't really think about that anymore. I don't really remember it anymore. So
ding, ding, ding.
Right.
Message.
But we gotta get through there. So I have
I gotta pause this. Ryan, pause here. Do you want some water?
Yes, please.
All right.
I
I'm about to grab this water.
Yeah, grab.
Wait a minute.
Go.
Are you trying to say it sound a little dry?
7:35.
I just couldn't drink that. I was about to crack that open. Then I started feeling terrible. Like, wait a minute.
Yeah, good call, Kev.
Question: do you want it cold?
No, room temperature is fine for me.
Perfect. There's nothing in the fridge. Damn, ain't nothing in the fridge. I'm offering it. Ain't nothing in it.
Thank you.
That's all I was about to say.
Oh, thank you.
That look good. You're welcome. I went for my swig and I said, wait a minute. Something ain't right. All right. We're back.
So I wanted to just follow up on, you mentioned I got into banking and I just got really good at it. And I'm curious from your perspective, what allows you to get really good at something that you don't have actual experience or understanding before going into it? So I know you mentioned having a really good role model, and I know that's been kind of my cheat code to so many things, is like, I don't need to recreate the wheel. I can just kind of follow what people who are really good at have already laid the groundwork. But can you think of other examples of what allowed you to become really good at banking?
It's this inner knowing that I had about myself, and I think I had that since I was a young girl. Not to toot my own horn or anything, but I was super smart. I didn't have to try, but I wasn't pushed. So like in my, when I was in high school, let's say, I didn't try. I was always top 10% of my class. I probably could have been valedictorian if I tried, but I didn't try. I wasn't studying. I was in AP classes. I just had this thing about me. But because nobody pushed me further, I think I just, coasted like you would do in high school. But as I got older, I started to realize that I can't wait for somebody to push me. I have it in me, and I didn't like how it felt when I didn't give my best. So I'm like, okay, if I don't like how that feels, I'd rather give my best. You know what you're capable of. Why don't you start there? And it started from there when I recognized short story. I wanted to always be a cheerleader in high school. I was a freshman, and I tried out for the cheerleading team. I sucked. I sucked so bad. I could not jump. I couldn't split. I was not flexible. But what I could do, I made sure I did it well, was I could cheer. I can cheer really well. And because of that, they chose me for the team because they said, you know what? I loved your attitude and how well you cheered, even though you couldn't do the jumps and all that. Just work at it. So I went home every day. I sat on my wall to make myself flexible. And not even a year or two later, I became the cheerleading captain. Mm-hmm. So from there, I went back when I was in banking. And I always remember that story. And I was like, whatever you want to do, you can do it. You just have to push yourself. Sometimes there's not always going to be somebody there trying to push you. Of course, it's very helpful when you do have that person. And I think that person for me in high school was my cheerleading coach. And then when I got into banking, it was Darnell. I love Darnell. He sat right next to me and he was just this energy fireball. I just loved his personality. I loved how the customers loved him. I was like, oh, I want that relationship with the customers. He just made it fun. He was charismatic and he was good at his job. He would sell, but you wouldn't even feel like he was selling. He was just really offering the solutions, and I loved that. And I asked him, can he teach me? And of course, he taught me. He sat right next to me. I mimicked, but I took it on and made it my own way. And then eventually I got more confident and comfortable. And I realized that is so helpful to, like you said, the cheat code. When you have somebody that's already successful in that field, why reinvent the wheel, right? Look at what they're doing. Yes, it might not work for you, but see what can work for you and try it. And that's exactly and that's my experiment, right? So that's exactly what I did.
Yeah, and something I'm take from that is to believe in the mission.
Yes.
Right? Because without that belief in what you're doing, I would imagine it would come off as disingenuous, and then it comes off as I'm selling something, right?
Yes.
Versus, hey, no, this is actually going to improve your life.
Exactly.
This is something that has improved my life, and now it becomes more attraction, right?
Yes.
Very, very interesting. So having worked in banking for as long as you did, what are just some common myths that come to mind in the banking industry?
Maybe a myth is that bankers are rich. All bankers are rich. I remember from one of my banking centers I was working for, I closed a $10 million deal, right? Of course, I didn't get nothing from that. I was like, oh, great job. Maybe an email went out. I didn't get anything from that. I still got my salary that wasn't even 10% of that. So that's a myth. What's another myth that I can think about banking? You know what? Banking was always seen as a very prestigious career, I think. I'm not saying it's not. It just really, it's not what it is. It's not not all banks are made equal. Let me just say that. And I feel like we know that.
Yeah.
I worked for 3. I can't name everybody, but
Yeah.
I worked for 3, so I had a lot of different experiences. I worked at many different banking centers and many different demographics, from very low income areas to very high net worth areas. And there's a big difference. How can I say this? In the treatment, in what goes on, how you're taught to even interact with the customers, what products are pushed, what products aren't pushed. So it can, if you don't really have a strong sense of self, like you said, and then also have a mission in mind, you can really get like lost in the sauce. Yeah, that's where I'm gonna stop right now.
I ain't mad at you.
And just to follow up on that, and then we can kind of switch gears. Are there kind of some just simple tips that come to mind for individuals who may not understand how the system works, or even they don't know what they want out of banking or finances, that people should just genuinely be aware of, or generally be aware of?
Let me piggyback off of that same question. With that said, there's this stigma of not trusting banks.
Yes.
Especially in the urban community.
Yes.
So just with his question and that, just with that in mind, I just want to see what you think.
Okay. Tips is always read the fine print. That's how I actually excelled. That was my cheat code. And I say that in any job you're in. I reverse engineer a lot. So I read documents. Sometimes we know the lack of training in many organizations is their downfall, right? Because they have a whole bunch of employees that don't know what they're doing. So they're unhappy, the customers are unhappy because they're getting wrong information, lawsuits, we see all that kind of stuff, right? It starts with the training. So if I'm a customer and a banker hands me something, I'm going to actually read it. Read the fine print and confirm. I always do this, and sometimes people think it's annoying, but it's really helpful. I always reiterate what you just said to me to clarify, just so I understand this is what this means, right? And have them circle it. Really read the paperwork that they give you. I think that's really important, because a lot of times if you don't read that paperwork, you can find yourself in a situation where you're charged a whole bunch of fees. You got your credit ran for a loan that you weren't even qualified for because you didn't even look at the criteria, or they kind of briefly threw you off. And if you don't feel confident, I always say, ask for the manager. 9 times out of 10, I know a lot of people do this. In the high net worth banking centers, they know who to go to. They know to go to the manager, the senior leadership, meaning like the assistant store manager. If there's a business banker, you want to talk to the business banker if you don't have access to the manager. Because what they understand is that 9 times out of 10, those tellers, those sales associates, they're not necessarily properly trained. I'm not saying it's the case with everybody, because there's some really good ones. I was a really good one, and I work with a lot of really good ones. But there's a lot of people that are just in the job. It's not a career.
Right.
So you want to be careful. And then as far as to address the stigmas about the minority people not trusting the banks, I can understand why. I just think it's an education. And I think that's why I made sure so much that I educated them on, these are the products and services that we offer. Here are the fees, but let me understand your situation so then I can best recommend, okay, this suits you better. This is how you do this so you won't pay a fee. I always make sure that I break it down to people so they understand, just like a simple savings account. Some of these savings accounts charge you, but if you just do an automatic transfer of $25 every once a month, that's it. You don't pay anything.
Right.
So I look at their paycheck, I break it down, I even go as deep, okay, what's your budget like? What are you paying to make sure, can you even afford the $25? Because we don't want to put them in a situation where, you know, they have these fees, they have this account, and they're taking money out of it, and now they're getting charged fees. So I make sure that I go deeper than the surface level, and I think a lot of transactions in the bank are very surface level. We don't have time to really get to know you. I just need you to make this transaction so you can get out and I can get another one.
Yeah, right.
There's a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, something that it wasn't even all that long ago I started to realize is that most industries, most people have very entry-level jobs that are like first jobs, right? So I'll show up somewhere and I'll blindly expect that I'm working with an expert.
Yes.
And in reality, I'm working with someone who went to school for something wildly different and there's no jobs available and they just happen to get this job.
Yes.
They're here for a paycheck. But that's not just banking, right?
No.
Like, that is quite literally
Everywhere.
any field, which is, it is interesting because I'll speak for myself, for so long, I would just blindly be like, oh, they must be an expert. They work at such and such place, right? And now knowing it, having that awareness, it completely changes my interactions when I go places where I'm doing prep work before I go, so I don't get taken advantage of.
That's a good one.
But that's also after I've been burned so many times.
Trusting.
Just trusting, right?
Good point.
So in kind of segueing, and I'm really curious, Kevin talked about it at the top, of transitioning to entrepreneurship, right? I would imagine that most people who got to the level of VP in any industry or for any company would say, this is a wonderful job. I can lay back on my laurels and I can start to rest, right? Like, I've arrived.
Yes, I have arrived.
It does not sound like that was the case for you. So I am fascinated at what kind of led to the transition, what was that motivating factor, and how it actually came to be.
Yes. So we're probably going to have to do a part 2. But what I can say, the pandemic happened. And I was let go from my company. And it was very devastating, you know. I was the high income earner, you know. I worked hard, been in my field for a decade, climbing that corporate ladder. And I was just, you know, getting close to the top. You know, I wasn't even there yet. So I had a decision to make on what was I going to do. And there was an opportunity to get investing in trucking maybe just a year prior to that, and that I turned down. And I thought about it and I was like, hey, you know what? Why don't we start a trucking company? You know, it's highly regulated. I love operations. I'm very operational savvy. And I figured I can just transfer my skills that I learned in the bank into trucking. I know it was an entirely new industry, new field, but I always knew that I wasn't starting from scratch. You know, I'm just like, you know, I have experience with me. I had to figure out how to mirror that experience, and got some training and buckled down and did everything that followed the blueprint, did everything that blueprint said. And then I was able to get a truck on the road. But they didn't tell you all the other stuff that comes with it, right? I was probably working like 12 hours a day, trying to figure it out because I'm like, I had somebody else depending on me, right? I had somebody driving my truck. So that means now I'm responsible for someone. It's good that I had the experience as leading a team. So I'm like, okay, I understand. I have to just take care of my person. So making sure they were good allowed them to work happier and allowed me to focus on the back end on what I needed to do to keep them being good. And that's how I got into trucking is that opportunity that happened. And I passed it up and I was like, you know what, let's try it. And me and my partner got in and we did really well for ourselves the first, 3 months, definitely we hit 6 figures. I didn't even know I hit 6 figures in the business until we met with an accountant and like she was helping with my books and everything. And then she's like, yeah, this is how much you made. I'm like, wait, what does that number say? And I was like, well, I never saw that. I was like, it's a very proud moment.
Yes.
My head's been down so much, just working so hard. I didn't even know. I didn't even know that we hit that milestone. So I was very proud of myself. And we ended the year pretty well. And it just let me know that no matter what industry you're in, you will always be good, no matter what, because you have those foundational pieces. And that's what led me to want to teach other entrepreneurs that are starting a business that they're not starting from scratch. Everybody has their own certain je ne sais quoi that you can just bring out. And that's why my company is called the Rose Effect, because it's not just about the rose effect, right? Everybody has their own special effect. Sometimes you just need somebody else on the outside to help you bring that out. And that's what I'm able to do with my clients that I work with. So I hope that answers the question about the trucking.
I do.
So I'm curious how you actually landed on trucking, whether was this like a passion thing?
No.
Was this I saw an opportunity? And were there other avenues that were on the table before landing on trucking?
Yes. So great question. So I've been trying this entrepreneurship even while I was still in corporate. So in 2018, I always wanted to be a real estate investor. So I thought I was going to be a wholesaler. Formed my LLC, started making some calls, and quickly was not dedicated. So I let that company sit on the shelf. And then my friend, I got with a young woman who was a banker as well, and she was very ambitious, and that's who brought the opportunity about trucking to me. And I had a few family members that were in trucking, but I never really paid it too much mind. I listened to an interview from my mentor that I actually ended up getting training from, which is Alex from Good Energy. And
yes.
He did Earn Your Leisure interviewed him, and it was way before Earn Your Leisure blew up.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is a really good interview. I'm like, I never thought about trucking, but how he presented it and everything, I was like, I think I like this. But, I just pushed it to the side. I'm like, maybe I'll go back to real estate. I did go to real estate school after I got let go. I was like, okay, let me go get my real estate license and sell real estate. And then after I completed it, I'm like, I don't know. I just don't feel it. And I was like, I think I need to try the trucking. And I took his course and I'm like, this is it. This is what I need to be doing. Trucking. And that's how I landed on it.
So just this internal.
It was just a
feeling.
Yeah, that from everything was just an alignment from watching the interview, having someone bring me the investment opportunity, but passing it up and it just coming back. I just started to feel it in my bones. I kept on seeing the trucks everywhere. And I'm just I started paying more attention. And I was like, what was the one thing that was moving during the pandemic? The trucks.
Yeah, that's when I was working. Yeah.
I wanted something that, no matter what was going on, they still needed, especially being in a job and that you're gone, right?
Right.
So I wanted something a little bit more sustainable. Real estate is good too, but there's ups and downs, but there's ups and downs to every market. But I was just I liked the ROI on trucking. I liked it. I definitely like the return on investment on trucking.
It is.
Big risk.
Yeah.
So something that stood out in a question that I have is, how do you determine if you're dedicated?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Hold on. You're on fire today.
Yeah.
Well,
You're locked in.
I'm truly curious. And one of the reasons is I have an opportunity in my life that I'll incorporate a little bit in. But it's something that, it's one of these things where if I did it, I would make incredible money, right? But the And it's nothing that we're working on. So I see you like holding your breath over there about to die. So don't worry about that.
Okay.
It's literally nothing there, but it's this thing. Okay. And I was talking it out with some people, and it's just like, it's not stimulating. And I know I can do it for the sake of doing it to cash a check, but it's not maintainable. I can't maintain that long term. And I came to that realization just using past experiences to be like, hey, I remember when I did jobs or I agreed to do service work or whatever that my heart wasn't really in, and how it pretty much just led to resentment. So that is kind of how I can determine, hey, is there this level of dedication that I can really see myself giving my everything to? So I'm wondering for you, how did you, because I think the idea of real estate is very sexy, yes, right? It is. Probably more than trucking.
It is.
However, you gravitated towards that trucking.
Yes.
So I'm wondering just how that worked out.
I think it was the work in my head, doing real estate, making those cold calls. I related it back to when I worked at an oil company. I worked for Hoffman Fuel, like in high school, and I would be the one telemarketing you, calling your house, selling you oil, and, you know, and although it paid me well for a high schooler, it was in a very, you know, it's hard getting hung up on and, you know, cursed out, but that built me up to be able to make real estate phone calls, but I related them both. I'm like, oh, I don't like this feeling that I'm bugging someone. Although I know I'm helping someone and I try to stick with it, it's getting through that barrier with them. And I wasn't really the best. I know my strengths and I know where my opportunities lie, and my opportunities lie in money, meaning that I am not like this money hungry woman who would kind of like lie to you about something just to make the sale. And I'm not saying you have to do that. You can lead with integrity, but a lot of times it's very misleading, some of the mentorship that you have when it comes to like wholesaling real estate. Of course, there's really a lot of good people out there now teaching like the right way to do it, but it can be hard when you're trying to get someone to sell you their home that you know it's not really worth that much because you're going to flip it to another investor. So, you know, to make this large profit, knowing that they could have probably benefited from an extra couple of thousand too, but you want to get some money on top of it. So it was like this complex for me. And I was like, yeah, it's not for me right now. I'd rather do like maybe traditional investing, not really having to wholesale. And that's why I was like, you know what, that I tried it. I know when to say no. I know when to keep on going, and I also know when to say no. And I was like, yeah, it's a no for this avenue, because I tried it multiple times. I didn't just like try it one time and like give up. I tried it, stopped for a little bit, even got with someone else to work with, and I realized like this is not what I want to do. So I was okay with saying no.
It sounds like it wasn't necessarily in line with your values.
No, it wasn't.
Which is always like again, I know when I do something that's not organic, right? It typically leads to that resentment.
Yes.
Yeah.
So.
And it's a superpower to say no.
It is.
Like, yeah. That was like my downfall for a long time during my years of being a hardhead, being a knucklehead. I didn't know how to say no.
It's hard.
Woo, it's hard. So when you're able to say no, well, when you know yourself and know what works for you and what doesn't work for you, that's a big thing.
I'm still working on that, though.
Yeah.
It's a muscle that I'm still flexing because, you know, especially when you're giving and you're a server, you want to always serve people and you always want to be there for people. But I'm learning that I have to make sure that I'm not serving someone at the disservice of myself.
Absolutely.
And that's what I've been able to be confident now with, and not be a people pleaser anymore and say, okay, you know what? As much as I want to help you, this just doesn't align, or I just can't right now at this moment, and I'm gonna have to say no. So
yeah.
And it sounds like you've been, you know, burned a few times by,
absolutely,
right? Because I think that, especially being self-employed, right? I know for me, being self-employed, like I can make as much money as I want to work. So
yes.
More work equals more money, but at what expense, right? There's always that that point of it becomes sunk costs.
Absolutely.
And I know, again, for myself, the only way of recognizing that was paying all of the consequences
for not.
Right. And again, it's like, okay, I can make X amount more, but at what expense, right?
You lose the great smile you have.
That's it. No, I really do, though. I'm miserable.
Yeah, it's miserable.
And I take the smile off of everyone in my life, too, so.
That's a good point. When you start being mean and, like, people we love always gets the brunt of it because we never really be mean to people outside because we don't want them to see us that way or judge us. But people at home, we yell, we scream, we're irritable. Yeah. And that's when I started to realize, like, yeah, this is not it. This is not it.
So I want to take a quick step back, and Kev, jump in if you have questions of your own. But I'm actually remarkably curious about this piece. When you lost your job at the bank, what was that process like to going from, hey, I'm sure the sense was like, hey, I'm in this pretty comfortable spot, I have stability, to then all of a sudden, one, did you know it was coming? What did it feel like I was blindsided? And then two, how did you overcome that?
So I can't speak on too much of that. Okay. But what I can say is that I'm thankful that I had a support system because it was very devastating for me. It's embarrassing as well, especially when you have such tenure, and experience. Right. I definitely had to really sit with myself for a while. It was definitely tough, but then also I knew I couldn't stay there. I couldn't stay down for too long because I'm just like, you know what? I'm a believer, so I believe that, when God closes one door, another one opens, and there must have been a reason. What's the reason? What's the lesson? What did you want me to learn? And I pondered a lot. I sat, I reflected, and that's how I was able to know that, what you're going to do this time around, because now you're going to be working for yourself, right? You're building your own company now. You're making sure that those foundational principles are what you want. Take from all those experiences that you had, those good or those bad, and now you're going to start something of your own and make sure that it's truly how you want it to be done. Of course, starting from something from scratch, from new. I've never been an entrepreneur before. I've been a leader. Entrepreneur is different when you have to pay all the bills, and what you work, what you kill is what you eat. And if you don't kill anything, you're starving. Yeah. It's tough. It's definitely an emotional roller coaster. But I always look for the positives in everything and knowing that, okay, I'm going to make it. I'm very resourceful. So I seek out resources. And when I put it out there, I see everything as an opportunity. Some people are like, oh, this is not an opportunity. No, that's an opportunity. I know build relationships with people because they're the ones that are going to give you the business, right? So I did that really quickly by building relationships, being pleasant. I work in a heavy male-dominated industry, right? So these brokers are very high-strung, just like front and just hang up on you just fast. And I really have to work with them and learn how to kind of bring my essence on them, lower them down, slow them down a little bit.
You know what we call that?
What we call it?
You know what she's saying in a really nice way?
What's that?
One, she's like, I'm smarter than all of them, right? And then the second one is like, I'm just going to manipulate them all day.
I just have to, oh, how's your day going? Make sure that I'm not giving them back that aggressive energy and giving them something different to say, hey, I'm talking to a woman here. Like, hey, okay, you're nice. Hey, let's talk. How's your day going? I want to help you now. So that's what I learned to do. And I'm just going off on a tangent. I'm sorry.
No, when I say I love it. And I have a follow-up question for both of you, right? Because this just opened this door in my mind is like, what are the greatest principles to be successful?
Oh, I love that.
The greatest principles.
You mentioned a few in there that really stood out, right? Like, I think one is like being charismatic.
Yes.
Knowing how to read the room and form relationships and have good social skills is, and I would say that's more a skill than a principle. So maybe I'm going in a different direction. But never mind. The floor is your guys.
So sexual skills.
Principles.
So which one is it? Is it principles? Successful principles. I know for me, one of the main ones is empathy. Having empathy, giving people grace. You know what I'm saying? Giving myself grace. That's been a theme, right? That's been a theme. But being empathetic for the people that I'm attempting to work with, or I am working with, or whatever that is. You know what I'm saying? I think empathy goes a long way with success. Grace, accountability.
That's a good one.
Accountability. You know what I mean? If I messed up, it's on me.
I love that. I love somebody who's accountable.
That's when we talk about, so not to go off, but I'm gonna go off and bring it back. When we first started talking about doing this podcast, our name was going to be, what was it? Cheat Codes?
Something like that.
Yeah, so Cheat Codes to Life or something like that. And I always felt like once I became accountable, my whole life just completely 180.
I agree.
Completely. So I think when one is accountable, especially in business, that goes back to, you mentioned integrity earlier. Integrity is everything. And, you know, accountability, integrity is like peanut butter jelly. You know what I mean? So, you know, that's a good segue to integrity, accountability.
Yeah, integrity, personal responsibility is another one that comes up there, where I think all three of those, there's some overlap, but also some very clear differences.
Yeah, that would be mine right now, yeah.
So for me, it's transparency. I think to be successful in business, you have to be transparent.
100%. Agreed. 100%.
Goes along with your accountability. Also teamwork. You know, a lot of us have these things. I got it out the mud. I did it by myself. Nobody really ever did it by themselves.
I've never heard anyone.
Nobody.
Well, greatness is not achieved solo dolo at all.
And that's the thing, you know, it's big. You know, you'll hear it around on social media a lot. Like, I did this by myself. I did it out the mud. But I'm like, okay. You know, nobody's ever built a business alone. I always say Amazon is not a one-man show.
Nope.
Right? Tesla is not a one-man show. Nike is not a one-man show. Like, you need people. You need a team. And they need to be treated as such. They need to know that they're just as important as the CEO. I get it. Maybe not. But maybe they are, because they're the ones that keep the wheel going. And I think it's like the hub and spoke. Like, one doesn't move without the other. And everybody has to understand their importance.
Right.
And that's the difference.
And that's the key there, right? Because I think if I'm sitting back looking at a company, I'm going to say probably like objectively the CEO is more important than the, you know, the low man on the ladder. With that said, try telling the low man on the ladder that he's less important than the CEO.
Exactly.
Right? Like, we are all the most important person to ourselves when we see the world through our eyes, right? And it has to be that way, right? You can't ever not say that. So there is some like objective truth to it, but then you have to take into the subjective account of we're all our most important person.
You know, I learned that in my experience in banking, actually leading a team. I had a situation during the pandemic where one of my employees kind of called out, and we were only 2 people to a branch at the time. And I had a very busy branch, like meaning like my branch was like nonstop. So 2 people to a branch is like not going to work. And he called out, but he didn't call to me. He went directly to HR. Something happened. And some of my team that had to come in to cover them was, you know, talking junk, mad, you know, oh, what's going on, blah, 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 blah. But then I had to think about it. At first, initially, I was mad and upset, like, oh, why didn't he call me? But I was like, you know what? He did what was best for him. And then I was like, well, how can I be mad at that? I'm only mad at that because I don't do what's best for me. And in that moment, I realized, and I was just like, wow, like, you know, you just don't get mad at people anymore. And that's how I run my company now. So if my driver needs time off unexpectedly, you know, I have to just roll with the punches, because I'm at the end of the day, he's doing what's best for him, and that is okay. And I learned that. So exactly what you said, people see the world through their own eyes, and they should be the main character in their own story. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and I would argue it's not even a should, it's just that they are.
Yeah,
right?
They are.
Like, there's no way to change that or to not have it
But some people don't see themselves as that. And, you know, I used to be one of those people that I didn't know that I was the main character in my own story. I thought everybody else mattered more than me, or, you know, or more important. And I'm not saying one is more important than the other. It's just making sure that we are doing what's best for us, not at the detriment of ourselves, you know, still helping people. Like you said, saying no when you need to say no, and say yes when you can say yes.
And that brings us to our next principle of success, awareness.
Awareness. I love awareness.
His favorite word of all time
is awareness.
What?
Well, I think that and I'm not, I want to throw this out, like, I'm not saying that this is accurate. I'm saying that this is how I simplify things, is that so much of life is about awareness, right? Like, and I probably use this example, so people will probably be annoyed if I say this, but if I think that the only way to get to New York is 95, the only way to get to New York is 95. Well, what happens when there's a huge traffic jam or a huge accident and the highway shuts down? Now I have to sit there until the highway reopens. Well, if I know that there's actually like 5 or 6 ways to get to New York, now I have 5 or 6 options, right? that means I'm going to have a better option than if I just had one. So I think in life, it's all about developing an awareness, because awareness creates more choices create better choices create better quality of life.
Go ahead, man.
You see why I love this guy, right? You see why I love this guy?
And again, I want to say, like, I'm by no means saying that that's the way, but that is a way that I try to apply in my life to really see I don't know what I don't know.
Yes.
And I love, like, I talk to my brother about this all the time. Like, I'll look back even like 6 months or a year ago and be like, damn, I was so stupid. Like, I can't believe I did this, this, and this. And I know for a fact that I'll be reflecting back, you know, in 6 months, being like, man, you remember that podcast with Rose? Like, I said this, I was crazy. Yeah. Right. But it's the idea, like, to slowly really just try to recognize what I don't know.
Yeah. Your level of awareness, the triple A's: awareness, acceptance, acknowledgement. I think it's very important in life. I do a lot of reading, and one of my gurus, Sadhguru. I don't know if have you gentlemen heard of Sadhguru? The Indian mystic.
I can say,
I feel like I heard it, but I'm not familiar.
I don't believe I have.
Okay. He's very popular. He's popular because the way that he simplifies things, very simplistic, and I love it. And I love it because it's just like, there it is. It's just like those simple principles that we talk about have such big, powerful meanings. And he teaches that. And I did a lot of studying under him, and awareness is the big one, is being aware and accountable for myself as well. And understanding that every action has a reaction, and I am, right, the alchemist of my life. I'm creating, right? Life is not happening to me, it's happening for me. So just understanding that is very important in my journey. But I think the work is understanding that, because when you're going through things, these trials, these tribulations, it just feels like, you know, hell is raining down on you. It's just, it's really hard to grasp that, you know, you're going to get through this and things are going to work out in your favor while you're falling up. But right now, you just see yourself falling. You don't see the bottom. So that's where the faith comes in.
Right.
And trusting that, okay, everything's working out. That's like my mantra. Everything's always working out for me. Everything's always working out for me. Everything's always working out for me. I have to repeat it to myself constantly. So,
yeah, and I think the hardest part is trying to get that idea across to someone who hasn't had that experience of thinking it's not going to work out and then it working out, right? And it's so... I was talking to our brother Andrew, like, I don't know, a few weeks back, and he kind of asked, like, what is your mission? What is the thing that drives you? And the thing that I can truly say drives me is this exact type of conversation. It's how can I help individuals build that awareness and understand that we don't know what we don't know, but it works out if we show up and we put in the work and we continue to change that mindset from that fixed mindset to that abundance mindset, that we are quite literally the creators of our destiny.
Yes.
And we can every single person, you choose what you want to do. There's a path within the laws of nature, right? There's a path to make it happen. But so many people, like you were saying, just don't recognize that. And it's one of those things that I don't know if it's possible to get that idea across without someone actually having some reference points.
I agree with you on that, because it's hard to tell someone. They're not going to seeing is believing for people nowadays. So getting that point across would be the challenge, but also supporting them where they are, I think is very important. And I always say leading by example. But sometimes that doesn't work because I'm like, hey, you're just lucky. Like, who cares about you? I don't want to hear your success. I also realize what I try to do with people, because I do some coaching and mentorship, is that I try to have them point out little synchronicities in their life, or also the gratitude. I know it's sometimes maybe it's cliche to people, but daily gratitude, right? It really works, because I'm a scientist, 100%. Guys. Remember, I'm a self-proclaimed scientist. So
that's right.
This is a study you guys can do. Wake up. Write 3 things that you're grateful for. 3 things. Write it down. Have a gratitude journal. Write it down every day. And in those days where you feel like you can't find anything you're grateful for, go back to that gratitude journal and look at it and like, okay, I was grateful for this. And what that does is that shifts your perspective. Your awareness changes now, right? So now you're tapped into the frequency of, okay, I'm tapped into the positivity that's happening to me. I'm not really tapped into all the negativity that's happening to me, because it's like radio stations, right? Whatever frequency you're on, that's all that you're going to receive. And when you're in that bad space, when you stub your toe, when you get out of bed, it just seems like everything goes downhill. Your coffee's burnt now. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. You go to the office, your coworker's snitching on you to the manager. It's just like a bad day. And because you said, oh, now today's going to be a bad day. You spoke it over your life.
You claimed it.
When you stub your toe, just let that pain flourish and say, you know what, today's still going to be a good day. Do your gratitude statements, find the positivity. Oh, somebody cut me off in traffic. You know what? That person needed to be to the office faster than me. Oh, my coffee's a little burnt. Maybe I just don't need to drink it. I'm just going to drink water today. Mm-hmm. How can we shift this? My coworker snitched on me. You know what? I did need to speak to my manager because I needed help anyway. So, hey, can you help me?
Yeah.
You got to turn these things around. And when we get mad at people, think about okay, what was the lesson, or what did I need from this? Like, what is this supposed to show me? And that's what I try to do. Of course, in the moment, I understand it's hard. So that's why we say, give yourself a second. If you need to be mad for a second. Just don't let it tarnish your whole day. Don't say, oh, my whole day is ruined. Just say, this is a moment. And the moment's going to pass like ocean waves, right? It just goes. Our emotions rise up, and then sooner or later, you calm down. You can't stay mad forever. So it's important.
And it does like that. It takes so much practice, and like everything, it's that first step that's the hardest.
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
It's actually doing it. And I know something that I've recently, within the past, half year, began to incorporate is daily gratitude, but also when I'm having those off moments, or when I'm feeling incredibly stressed out or burnt out, being grateful that I get the whole human experience, because that's part of it. And it's something that, again, I learned so much from Andrew, but he basically what he was able to do is shift his thought paradigms. And what he would do it with was he's an MD, PhD, he does all sorts of cancer research, and a lot of that is just reading very dense scientific literature, which for most people is very draining. But he was able to flip that thought paradigm to that being enjoyment and that being recreation for him. And I was like, wow, if he can do that, I can begin to bring at least some level of gratitude for just being able to get this whole broad experience, right? Because there's always the two sides, the yin and the yang, right? Like, if I can embrace the pain and suffering, how incredible are the good times going to be?
I love that.
And it, like so many things in the beginning, it didn't work at all. Like, it just didn't. I felt like such an idiot being like, oh yeah, I'm grateful. I'm so stressed out right now. And again, I would say probably still more times than not, it doesn't work that well, but I keep doing it. And sometimes it has worked. And that gives me hope that I'm going to stop my monologue after this, but like my whole life, I hated tomatoes. Like I like ketchup, tomato sauce, but like raw tomatoes, hated. Well, about 4 years ago, I made it a statement, because they look so good. I've always wanted to like tomatoes. So I'm like, no matter what, I'm going to eat them. I'm not going to go out of my way to eat them, but if they're on the food that they come in, I'm going to eat them.
Okay.
And 4 years later, I don't like tomatoes, but it used to be if there was a tomato, it like made my food shittier. Now, if there's a tomato, it doesn't make it better, but it doesn't make it shitty. It just is. And what that tells me is like, we can train ourselves to shift our likes by persistence, by continuing, by having that belief, right? Like, all these things really do work. So using my stupid tomato analogy, I think I can one day embrace the suffering and have some semblance of gratitude for it. Or at least I'm going to try. I'm going to keep going.
You're going to work at it.
No doubt. I think two things I want to say. What y'all both said was amazing. I think just going back to what you were saying, that gratitude book, or journal, excuse me. Whoo, that's a game changer when you just focus on that. But I think when we're thinking about gratitude from a place where you're down and out, you're falling, not at the utmost, you're going down, right? Or you feel like you're going down, and having the lesson that I learned, and one of our tags here is turning obstacles into opportunities. So now when I'm grateful not just to say, oh, I'm going through this and it's life, I got to go through this, but now for me, if I'm going through an obstacle, that's my springboard. I'm guaranteed to have something great happen, because you can't. It doesn't. It's greatness has to come from some turmoil, from a shitty situation, and anything I've been able to do the last few years in a positive way has come from that.
I love that.
I ain't gonna go into my thing. I'm a Buddhist though. You know what I'm saying? And I say that because the Lotus Sutra is just such a beautiful symbol. You know, from the muckiest and dirtiest areas becomes this beautiful flower. So we need that. And I was gonna say something, but you said it. But I want to just put it in a small ball for our listeners, because one of the things that we look to do on this podcast is what you literally did. So thank you, which is like breaking down in real time and in feasible ways to build your faith or to get over an obstacle. And I just feel like when we're talking about getting to a place of empowerment, how can I say this? You may not know how you get there, but if you're having those mantras, if you're having those affirmations, if you're having that journal, if you're over and over and over and over and over repeating, that's the way to build faith. I think people get stuck on how do I build faith when they have no faith. And I think one of the things to do is to over and over and over. And even when it don't work or don't feel like it works, especially at the beginning, it will work. And I think that's just one of the things I really want to highlight. Like, just let's as a community continue to use those affirmations and those journals or whatever you do to repeat it over and 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 change that perspective. Because once you're able to do that, it's off to the races. You know what I mean? So,
and everything you just mentioned, those are skills, right? And when you start doing something, guess what? Spoiler alert. You're gonna suck at it, right? Like you're gonna be
a rookie.
You're gonna,
you're a rookie.
And you are supposed to, right? And change is uncomfortable, right? Like I think the best analogy for me is like when you wake up and you're putting your pants on, which leg do you put on first? Because it's the same one every single day, right? And if it's both, then it's both right? But the idea is if you consciously, the only way to really do it is set a reminder, hey, if I put my left one on first, put the right one on first, try that tomorrow. It's going to feel so uncomfortable. Do that for 3 weeks, and now that other leg's going to feel uncomfortable, right?
So
like
true.
It takes time for change.
Was it 21 days to break a habit?
I mean, that's what they say. There's a book that says that, and I'm sure there's probably pretty good research on it, but the idea is it takes time, consistency, and discipline, and all of those things. Like discipline's a skill. It's not something that you just naturally have. It's something that is developed over time. But like you said, it's sticking with it, and part of it is having the belief that there can be something different, right? You don't even have to know what that different is, just knowing that something can be different in life.
Well, that's faith, right? We don't even know how it's going to happen, but we know it's going to happen.
It's the belief.
That's the belief.
Yeah. Whatever you believe is definitely going to come true. Mm-hmm. So that's how you know what your beliefs are, because if your life is not how you want it, check your belief system. Do you believe that you can get better? But if I know I want to be a millionaire, but when I look at my bank account, all I see is like $1,000. I don't have that belief because I keep on looking at my bank account. But I really have to believe that I am going to be a millionaire regardless of what my bank account's going to say, right? I don't have to worry about the how. I just know I'm going to get there, and I feel like a millionaire, right? I act like a millionaire.
Right.
What does the millionaires do? I start researching. Where do they go?
Yeah.
Maybe I could go over there and just say hi from the window.
and you just simplified
That's
that
real.
whole process, right? Because the idea is I can't do what I can't see.
Yes.
Right? And when I start aiming about it, and we just reading 10X by Grant Cardone. Yeah. And we're actually going to start Leaders or Readers segment on the podcast and kind of break that book down. But that's something he talks about. Like if I'm aiming at something and it's 2 feet high, I can only see 2 feet. If I'm aiming at something and it's 20 feet high, I'm going to see a hell of a lot more. And there's way more I'm going to see that, again, I don't know what I don't know, right?
Yep.
So, hey, what do millionaires do? Where do they go? Well, guess what? If I go there, I'm certainly not going to it's not going to hurt me, right? Nope. It's not going to be like, oh, now I can't be a millionaire. No, the likelihood of it increasing my opportunity to see something that I didn't previously know existed, it increases, right?
Your awareness now.
That's it. So just, I want to segue back because when you filled out our little guest form, you had mentioned losing a partner. Is that like a separation or a passing away?
I want to say, if I can remember, not a passing away, excuse me, a separation.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I just wanted to touch on the idea of loss for a minute, but I didn't know which type of loss it was. So I just wanted to.
They both almost feel the same.
Yeah. So I wanted to read a quote because I really like this quote, and it's death leaves a heartache no one can heal. Love leaves a memory no one can steal. And I feel like there's.
Where do you get that from?
I've the interweb. Everything's on there. I'm gonna read it one more time because I stumbled through it. So it's death leaves a heartache no one can heal. Love leaves a memory no one can steal. So you mentioned loss throughout. Do you heal from loss? And if so, how have you healed from loss?
I feel like I have. I recently lost probably about 3 members of my family, close matriarch people in my family, and also losing my partner, who we had a very close relationship, building businesses together, very close friendship, right? And it did feel like a death, although that person is still here, right? It's just that loss of not really being able to interact with the person the same, not having that same energy anymore. And where I found peace was in the relationship that we did have, the memories that I created, and knowing that sometimes things can't stay with you forever. And I needed to be able to let that go so I can reach the next level of my journey, because maybe they weren't supposed to come with me. And knowing that, I found peace and solace, and knowing that, okay, I had these good times. I know what it feels like. So I know when I get it again, what can I expect, right? So, and even with losing my people in my family, I still have them close with me, and I feel like their energy has never left me. And I just rest in the fact knowing that, okay, there's more. And sometimes I don't want to freak people out, but I dream about them. And when they come to me in my dreams, we have these conversations, and it just brings me peace. And I'm just like, you know what? I know they're still here with me. They're guiding me. They're my angels. When I'm going through those moments where I don't feel good, I just sometimes I call out to them, and I just feel like this. Sometimes I'll see a butterfly. One of my cousins who passed, she loved butterflies. So when I see the butterfly, I'm like, oh, there you go. You're letting me know that you're here. It's those little synchronicities, those signs that we get that some people overlook. I pay attention to those things, and that's what brings me my peace and my solace. Yeah.
You ain't freak me out at all.
Okay, you weird girl talking about somebody came to you in your dream. But yeah.
Nah, I'm Haitian, so my mother been saying that.
Okay, so you understand.
For real. She said she had a dream about me last night. I said, I gotta go, Ma. I gotta talk to you. I have to talk. You wait. You wait right there. Okay, what's the dream, Ma? For real. Damn, this is a good conversation.
Yeah, I'm sad that it is just about over.
Is it?
Yeah, we're at the hour mark.
No.
I swear. It literally...
You ain't cut out the water break?
I did cut out the water break.
And it's still?
Yeah, the water break was only a minute. But with that said, we like to ask every guest one final question.
Okay.
And what that is if you could give one piece of advice, one single piece of advice to someone who had just, fallen down and was really stuck and didn't know there was a way out, what would it be?
Okay, let me think about this. Because I'm pulling from when I fell down. And when I fall down, what do I do? I'm going to tell them it's okay to stay there for a little bit. Like some people say, oh, you have to get right back up and get back into it. It's okay to rest there. Just don't make it a home. Don't pack up and live there. It's okay to rest there and give yourself whatever time you need. Feel sorry for yourself. Cry, yell, scream. you have to go through those emotions and understand that it's okay to not be okay. You don't always have to be happy. You don't always have to have the next move figured out. You could just stay there for now. But eventually, what you're going to notice is that as time passes on, you are going to be able to get back up again. Just recognize when you do get back up. And it could be something as simple as getting out of bed for that day, right? That is a success for you. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be this big success, because sometimes everything has to be big and grandiose. It doesn't have to be. Those small things that you do, those small steps, maybe brushing your teeth. You know, when you're in depression, you don't want to do anything, right? Mm-hmm. Getting out of bed. Maybe you put on clothes today. Maybe you combed your hair. You are successful and you are getting up, and it's okay. Take enjoyment in every one of those moments is very important. And don't let society pressure you into doing things that you don't want to do. Like, it's okay not to be okay. You can have those days. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to talk to anyone. But just don't stay in that space. You can visit it. You could pop and say, hi, I remember you. Close the door and get back up.
I love that answer.
Yeah, that's my message.
Oh, man. Yeah, that knocked it out of the park.
Oh, thank you.
That was awesome.
I'll speak for myself, but even though I know Kevin shares this statement, we very much appreciate you coming out and coming on. This was a fun conversation for me. I definitely learned... I learned some good things. And I'm going to check out, is it Saguru?
Yeah, Saguru. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to check out...
Saguru?
Sadhguru?
I'm going to look into that this evening. Because that's...
He got books too and all that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, so there we go.
Yeah.
Leaders are readers. Yeah, we got
that. All right. Well, yeah, thank you again. And thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you for having me, gentlemen.
Falling Up Podcast.